I talked to a grower yesterday that called me from an area that has a lot of hurricanes and tornadoes. They're looking to grow a crop that is resistant. So within the genetic material okra, there are many dwarf plants, small plants that that can stand and take a lot of wind. We're also looking at other African crops that are well suited to saltwater incursion and other things. So that genetic material is where lies the food of the future, the crops of the future.
In this episode of Voices from the Field, NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialist Gabriella Soto-Velez talks with Bonnetta Adeeb, the founder of Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance. Ujamaa is a nonprofit collective of BIPOC growers, farmers, and gardeners who cultivate and distribute heirloom seeds and grow culturally meaningful crops. Gabriella and Bonnetta talk about the cultural role of seed saving and heritage crops, as well as the importance of agriculture in defining and protecting cultural identity. Let's listen.
Hey there, everybody. This is Gabriella Soto-Velez, and I'm a Sustainable Ag Specialist here at NCAT. And today I have the honor of sitting with one of Ujamaa's OG original grannies, Bonnetta Adeeb. Welcome, Bonnetta. Thank you so much for being here today. And I'm really excited to speak with you today about the lost art and science of seed saving. So maybe you could go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe explain a little bit about Ujamaa and what does that word mean?
All right, so one of the attempts for African Americans over the centuries has been just a constant battle to try to reclaim and hold on to our heritage, to define ourselves. And that work was basically done by a group of African Americans in the 1960s under the leadership of Maulana Ron Karenga. And what they did is they came up with the concept of reclaiming that African heritage, and it was called Kwanzaa. So during Kwanzaa, there were 7 principles that they felt that would be useful in terms of reconstructing or rebuilding a nation of really almost orphans, people who were taken from many different cultural communities who found themselves, in a place working together, creating new communities. And so it was decided at that point that because Swahili was a trading language that was used multiple countries, that it would be a good place to start. And so they chose 7 principles that could help to rebuild a fractured and group of orphans and build a new community and a new culture. So we realized immediately that not everything was lost. There were many things we held on to. And so when it came time for us to build out a community, we felt we wanted to go with some prior knowledge. And many people have been celebrating Kwanzaa, for 50, 60 years in this country. So it was something that people could start with. So we started with the idea of the extended family. So the idea of communities working together, supporting each other, sharing, building a community was very much behind the concept of Ujamaa. And so that's how we got started, with the idea that each one would teach one, we would help each other, we would share materials and resources and knowledge, and we would honor the elders and do all the things that had been pretty universal across African communities, and would be fairly straightforward in terms of restoring, something that was lost.
Thank you for sharing the start of Ujamaa. Earlier when we were talking, you were kind of speaking about the pandemic and how that really was a catalyst for the seed saving movement within your community. And I was wondering if maybe you could explain a little bit how that impacted you and why did that create such an interest in seed saving?
I think that prior to COVID, there was a belief in the African American community and diaspora community that somehow we needed to escape the farm, escape the toils, the hard work of growing your own food, and then it was progress for us to be able to have other careers that were not related to agriculture. Uh, and to me, that was misguided. It was misguided because it was throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, you don't throw the baby out. So the prime reason why our ancestors were chosen, selected uh, to build this country was because of their agricultural skills. Although, in order to dehumanize us, it was important to that the idea that we were human beings, that we had knowledge, prior knowledge that would be useful, had to be uh, destroyed by through the process of imperialism, colonization. Whether they were giving us credit or not, we were still, growing rice. We were figuring out how to grow in all kinds of conditions, in swamp and in water. In upland, in mountains, wherever uh, enslaved people found themselves, they had skills that they brought. They were able to apply to new conditions. And also, there was an interesting thing, like all the conditions that were here across this vast continent of North America, well, those were replicated in the continent. So it was really interesting to me this summer as I was traveling in the mountainous regions in Central Africa. It was so cold, it was rainy, it was just so much information about the continent of Africa is just unknown to folks. And so it was exhilarating to see the genius of agriculture, how every space was being grown, beautiful plants, and people had the capacity to take care of themselves, in a place where there's no government support. Every man, every family's on their own, and people are doing it. They're surviving. In this country, in efforts to flee the ravages of Jim Crow and all of that, we left the farm. My family left under the cover of night and left to go to California. Before that, my family left to South Carolina to go to Massachusetts and Maryland, Baltimore, other places in efforts to escape oppression and try to build out a new life that was not that was free of the toils of the fields and forced bondage, working under those conditions. Unfortunately, as we fled by night, we forgot to pick up some of the packs of seeds and the things that were able to sustain us, not only sustain us, but create really the culinary culture of the South and really what is America. So we ran, you know, like I said, my family, was actually even coded language, when they left at the middle of the night to try to leave North Carolina. Uh, and the idea was that we would do fine wherever we went. But unfortunately, there were some opportunities that were not available. And the opportunity that was difficult for people was having control of their own food supply. So for many years, it was customary for the Southerners to bring food to cities. It was also customary for when you went home during the summer, you would come back with a truckload of food. There were actually people, many families who routinely brought, as a matter of fact, it's still happening. And I met with some South Carolina farmers that are bringing watermelon to New York City, to Boston. They bring it up every week. They bring truckloads of traditional African food. Of course, people don't know that watermelon is a traditional African food, but they know on a hot summer day in an urban center where you don't even have air conditioning, it's refreshing, it's hydrating. Uh, but the beauty around that plant, around that tradition, has been denigrated. And I don't know if you know the history of watermelon, but one of the reasons why, as a crop, it was denigrated, and even the eating of watermelon was considered, it was laughed at. There's all these statues and artwork around, the Southern folks eating a piece of watermelon, how disgraceful that was. That whole effort was because watermelon was one of the major crops that enslaved people after slavery during Reconstruction. They were able to make a lot of money selling watermelon. It was a major source of revenue for a community and farmers in the South. So by making it so disgraceful that people in the North didn't want to eat it, by making the raising of it, it was another way to reduce that revenue stream to Black families. So much of what America does is purposeful, clear focus in terms of preventing people from surviving. So I think it's a mistake for people to believe that someone else has their best interests in mind. If a family is to survive, and they must be able to take care of themselves and, you know, not count on others, particularly the grandchildren of the slave master, to be the ones with solutions and for their needs. So it's a tremendous importance that we go back and honor the work of the knowledge of our ancestors, their skills, recognize those. Most of the historic Black colleges were founded as agricultural institutions. Honor that, but do more than honor that. Also to revive that knowledge and to bring that knowledge to refute the idea that it's shameful to grow your own food or to use an ancient crop to hydrate yourself during the summertime. Nothing wrong with it. Now a cucumber is a cucumber. It's okay to eat a cucumber, but actually a watermelon is more hydrating than a cucumber. And it tastes really good and sweet. Uh, so just all the varieties, all the knowledge around that, anything that can strengthen the community and help the community believe in themselves is a good thing.
Thank you. So how does that translate to the modern day? What are you doing with small farmers, and how are you spreading this knowledge about traditional varietals and traditional seed saving techniques? What is Ujamaa doing out in the fields, to share this knowledge?
Interesting enough, because we just published two new brochures, with the third one coming, talking about what are African crops. What we found is that when we ask that question in general, the answer is zip. It's sort of like we're at the beginning of that conversation. So I was talking to a farmer just yesterday, and he called me to talk about okra, and he chose okra because of its cultural importance. He's in Louisiana, and he was saying that's one of the states where people have really believed that that's an important crop. But in many states in many areas of the country, they've lost interest. Oh, I don't like okra because it's slimy. Whereas that mucilage quality of it is one of the major reasons why it's, in the estimation of many scientists, probably one of the most nutritious of all foods. So it's a lot to do. And so we start by introducing people, asking people some basic questions about what they know, and soliciting conversations around it, and getting people excited about this knowledge. I think another super important crop that people are talking about is rice. There's an interesting topic about African rice and how the information was actually suppressed about there being not just an Asian source, but an African source of rice. Particularly interesting is the fact that African rice is low on the glycemic index and can be grown under so much conditions. It does not have to be grown in flooded plains that are dangerous for, damaging to the environment. And so now there's increased interest in knowledge as markets for African rice are drying up in Africa, with the idea that Asian rice is better. Anything that's not African is better. I refute that. I stand in the doorway I'm the warrior for for that. I will fight for that in my traditions, and I will also fight for the right of my grandchildren. I have two beautiful grandsons to feel pride in their agricultural roots. It means a lot to me that they like playing in the soil and that they can use their cars and their trucks to play in the soil, but they also understand that a cherry tomato can be super yummy. Uh, when they're out playing in the yard, they can go and harvest the red ones. Those are really tasty. And or there's a plant that attracts the butterflies, and it's all kinds of beautiful insects flying off this plant. Just their connection is super crucial to me that we just demystify and decolonize our knowledge and our attitudes toward our traditional vocations. One more thing I want to say about agriculture is that the thing that makes a civilization is the ability for that society to raise enough food so that there's excess. So if there's a few farmers who can successfully feed a community, then that leaves the rest of society to be able to do other tasks. That's the basis of civilization. There would be no civilization without agriculture. So y'all get over it. Thank a farmer. I tell every farmer at the beginning of any of my presentation, stand up, hold your head up, hold your shoulders back. Those people could not eat. They couldn't get through a day without the work that y'all do, you farmers. You should take more pride in what you do and in the work of your ancestors. So a lot of what I do is just, you know, pushing people up and bringing back the pride in that I was blessed, luckily taught as a child that I understand so many other families lost those stories.
I definitely agree with you because nutrition is one of my side passions, I guess I'd say, aside from agriculture, but they really go hand in hand.
They do.
And what's really interesting is that the food that is subsidized and produced here in the United States is not health promoting food at all. It's mostly filler. And when you look at a lot of these indigenous foods, whether it's, bitter melon or breadfruit, or as you were saying, African rice, they all have really powerful health benefits and they have really low glycemic indexes, which would actually help these different, BIPOC populations because they're usually the ones that suffer from a lot of the health problems in the United States, like type 2 diabetes and obesity, because of the problems within the food system, access to nutritious food. So I really think that the work that you're doing is really powerful in getting, the youth as well excited about eating these foods and connecting again with the land and their heritage. For me, I think it's just a really powerful mission and it's exciting.
Yeah, the seed part is one of the crucial stories in connecting people up. Naima Penniman has done a beautiful painting of seeds being braided in the hair. And I just, the first time I saw that painting, I got choked up because I remember, I'm a high school teacher of African American history. And I remember when they excavated the slave quarters in New York City, if you remember down on Wall Street, they found a burial ground
Mm.
of all these people who had worked to build up the city during the development of New York City. And one of the things is, do you know this story about New York City? So they
I
found this.
don't.
Well, they're building, some skyscraper in Wall Street, and they found all these bodies, and they realized it was a burial site for enslaved people. They excavated it. It was open for many, many years, and you could go there now. The memorial is there. They learned a lot about who were the enslaved, and what they found out is a lot of the workers who were doing this construction work. It's cobblestones there, and and bricks and that kind of thing that they were building the city with. And these little kids, most of them between the ages of 12 and 16, that they used to carry the bricks and the stones that were used to, they moved them across the city. And what would happen was that because they were walking on uneven surfaces, these children were carrying between 200 and 300 pounds of stones on their head. And when you walk through the streets of most places in Africa, particularly in Western Africa, you'll see people carrying heavy loads on their head. It's a certain kind of posture that you have to carry this load, shoulders back, you see I'm going somewhere right there. The shoulders are back, the head's front. And, as you carry that, of course, you develop very strong neck and back muscles. But what would happen is because the surfaces were unpaved, if a child's foot would hit a stone and they would trip, it would immediately snap their necks. And so many children these small children were buried in this particular spot. As they excavated, they found they had amulets around their neck. They found they had different little pouches, and around their clothing and built into their clothing, there were seeds that were woven into their jewelry, into little pouches, and into their garments.
Mm.
This is such an important story because what that means is that Mama had hope and faith that her children would survive. And so, in order to ensure that they could live in the future, even though they weren't sure that they weren't going to be cannibalized, because there were rumors that the white folks were eating Black people. I think they did eat them in some sense. Maybe not the flesh, but certainly
Spiritually.
their efforts, their labor was cannibalized. But so Mama gave these seeds to their babies in hope that they could survive in the future. So this symbol of what seeds means is faith that our ancestral mothers and grandmothers had, that we would survive, and they prayed that we thrived. So that hope is what's carried in the seeds. The belief in the future that we will make it, that we can thrive, is such an important story. In those seeds that came with those children came incredible biodiversity. The genetic material that's in these land-raised crops is incredible. And there lies the future future crops, things that can withstand climate change. I talked to a grower yesterday that called me from an area that has a lot of hurricanes and tornadoes. They're looking to grow a crop that is resistant. So within the genetic material of okra, there are many dwarf plants, small plants that can stand and take a lot of wind. We're also looking at other African crops that are well suited to saltwater incursion and other things. So that genetic material is where lies the food of the future, the crops of the future, that will be able to withstand all the craziness that Mother Nature is throwing at us. And, I am not blaming Mother Nature. I mean, certainly she's got to defend herself, and we have been quite a fly in her bonnet, So I think she's swatting at us. I like to say that if we're not really, really careful, we're going to go the way of the dinosaurs. They messed up. So she drop-kicked them off the planet, And at the rate we're going right now, unless we do something different, she's going to have to do the same thing with us. We're quite a pest. She will survive, but we may not, unless we change our wicked ways and go back to what is right in our treatment, our relationship. We're not saying that we believe that science is important, but science in respect to others, to respect to the welfare of the soil, and to other animals and to the natural world. So responsible science. And so I believe we can do it all. I believe we can have new crops, new products, new value-added things developed, but with the basis of starting with good quality heirloom varieties of seeds, and then using regenerative agriculture as the tool for developing climate sensitive crops, be they fruit trees or greens or grains or whatever we need to do, working with Mother Nature instead of trying to slap her in the face every time she turns around. She's not going to have it. She's not going to take it. You know she won't, right? She's a granny. She's not gonna, you cannot do it to a granny. We will not put up with everything.
She's the real OG granny.
Right. She's the original.
Don't have time to stay up to date on the freshest sustainable agriculture news, events, and funding opportunities? You can trust NCAT to keep you connected with our weekly harvest e-newsletter. Subscribe today at ncat.org and get your weekly harvest delivered each Wednesday.
I work a lot in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and your name and Ujamaa come up often because, with the storms and the access to inputs or the lack of access to inputs and good quality seeds is a real issue. And so something that the people in the Caribbean territories are really excited about is, the sovereignty that would come from seed saving and from in situ production of crops that would evolve over time and suit that environment. So I think that that's a really exciting thing to be moving towards. And I'm wondering, in regards to Ujamaa and moving forward, what are your hopes for how things would evolve and how people would adopt these practices and maybe go back to different eating patterns?
Well, it's so exciting. Thanks for mentioning that. One of the things that we had observed in the Virgin Islands was the amount of African crops that had naturalized itself in the Virgin Islands. The moringa, neem, breadfruit, tamarind, even baobab. Not to mention all the healing herbs and all the amaranths and other greens. So this is one of the most exciting things about the work we're doing is even identifying these crops and understanding, there again, if you think about mama sowing those seeds into the hem or in the amulets or in the hair. I mean, those seeds are alive and well and growing. But of course, because the information has been purposely, disrupted. People don't know that those are African crops, and they don't understand the power of biodiversity and the need to protect and to observe and identify those things. So it's so interesting. I remember one of the crops that that we've identified from the Virgin Islands is a pepper. That it looks like a Scotch bonnet. So depending on where you are in the African diaspora, there's a scale of heat that you like. So, for instance, in Puerto Rico, in Cuba, they want that pepper to be flavorful, but they want it to be mild. Whereas in Jamaica, they want it hot, and in Trinidad and Tobago, they want it off the chart hot. Okay. They want it, they want that. But these peppers look almost identical. What's different about them is that they have been bred for particular characteristics of heat. So if I laid those peppers aside, if I laid it aside other peppers from a habanero, you probably visually could not tell the difference. The difference is actually in the flavor and not in the flavor per se, but in the heat level. Because the thing that they bring to a pot is almost identical to the other flavors that are in that crop. So I think that there lies the closest place where we can see the benefits of this process of naturalization. So I hope to do more work in the Virgin Islands. We are talking to the university about developing, a seed bank, but there's a challenge there because there's a disconnect between the intellectual community and the indigenous seed savers.
And the actual need on the island, there's the big disconnect as well.
And because of the lack of water supplies, this is a really crucial place where you need to be looking at these land-raised crops. You're not going to get more water on those islands. Climate change is real, and it's persistent, and it's progressive. So rather than trying to figure out more ways to water that, I think let's look at the resources we have. Let's observe and find plants that can manage and survive with less water. We're working with the Native Seed Search, and they've identified, thousands of plants that can live in a desert environment. They exist. So why are we beating our head over the ground, trying to grow crops that are not suited to climate? Let me give you an example. In East Africa last year, due to drought, there was a failure of the maize crop. So maize has been adopted as the primary grain for many communities in Eastern Africa, Southeastern Africa. Interestingly enough, when the maize crop failed, they still had time to plant their indigenous crop, which was sorghum, which can survive on the 1/60 amount of water that maize has. So guess what? Now all of a sudden, our friends, our folks who have been trying to tell these people that we need to preserve indigenous crops, now all of a sudden people are interested in what they have to say. It was a failure of the major crop. It was interesting because not only was sorghum able to survive, but then the whole discussion about how it has historically been a sacred crop is now back on the tongues of the people. So what was once sacred due to drought has now been resurrected. Not only is the crop sacred, but it also makes some of the most delicious beer. And I must tell you that one of the major revenue streams for women has always been beer production in many Southern African communities. Women made beer and sold it to the men, and that's how they got a lot of their spending money, was from the production of beer. So anyway, there's a lot there, and I think it's the collection of all these small vignettes, these small stories that help people to begin to understand the work we're doing. Of course, all of this is best told through the story of Collard. Collard is the best example we have, and the one that seems to be most salient in African American communities, which is the story of how our ancestors made a way out of no way. So another phrase hasn't been lost, I remember as a child hearing, the Lord will help you make a way out of no way. As you travel, as you visit the Museum of African American History and Culture, they're another one of our partners. There's a huge exhibit, Making a Way Out of No Way. How do you do it? Well, you do it by faith, observation, knowledge, but it's some work. Your will to survive and take care of your family, the desire to protect, and the belief that it's you that has the best interests of your family. Am I going to send my child to school with a school lunch? Do I like what's in that school lunch? Is it nourishing and good for my child? Is there another way I can make a lunch that I can afford to send? I remember in in Central California, that some kids would come to school with a quesadilla And some kids would come to school with a burrito that was full of cheese and beans. And it makes me salivate just thinking about that right now. That was the most delicious thing. It was a simple tortilla wrapped with beans and just a little bit of shredded cheese in it. It tastes better than the school lunches. And it was
Yeah.
certainly more nutritious. Sometimes there would be a little bit of rice in there. And what Mama did is she set up a perfect food. Rice and beans is a
Complete
perfect
protein.
combination. A complete protein, you know.
Yeah. That's another powerful discussion if we were to segue into the school lunch program, which we definitely don't have time for. But, speaking about, the government not necessarily always having the best interest of the citizens and maybe leaning more towards corporations and giving that food to our youth, especially those that, again, are often the most economically disenfranchised, is something to ponder for sure.
And the stories there, like one of the things that, I reminded a lot of families as I go is, look who had the lowest infant mortality rate. It's the community serving their kids beans and rice, okay, with some maybe lettuce and some tomatoes and a little salsa. That is the most nutritious American diet we can think of. So also, as we go back and look at Southern diets, it was so interesting what was on the stove. I always ask people to remember and to vision what was on the stove with the elders. And it was a lot of pots bubbling and boiling. You know, um, it was heavily plant-based. Chicken was probably only served in most households on weekends. It was not something that was eaten on a daily basis. So a lot of the diseases that we face, I'm particularly interested. I don't know much about it, but we have a wonderful woman who's Joy Ujamaa, who's a professor at Howard, who's a dietitian, a professor of that. We're looking at food allergies and unknown peanut butter and jelly used to be the number one meal served, and why are so many kids allergic to peanuts? So we have a lot of work to do to unpack this, um, but we're doing it. And the cool thing about this work is it's always attached to some really good food, some chefs, something yummy. So there's a benefit that I get by running in some really good circles of people who are really trying to help others understand and these foods and add them more back to their traditional diets. We ate greens every single day as a child. I never remember a day that there wasn't a green. But you know what? We had a big old garden. I grew up in California. I didn't really understand that was different until one of my best friends, whose name is Lynn Potato Head, and she was telling me that as a kid, that I mean we became friends in college. We were first year teachers, we first were working together. And she said ours was the only house where the whole backyard was a garden, and we ate from it every day. She said that was different from many other households she knew. No, I didn't know that was weird, but I do know that I long for a pot of greens. I have one of the things that we've adopted, we are adopting, is the use of more African style greens. For instance, the fact that we are not eating pumpkin leaves or squash leaves. We are not eating sweet potato leaves, which traditionally would have been the primary crop from black eyed peas instead of the tiny little pea as the primary crop, the leaves as the primary crop. So just regaining that knowledge, recipes, how do you prepare it? So if you planted a bunch of peas, the leaves are everywhere. We planted this long neck gourd. The leaves are everywhere. If you're going to need to prune those leaves, otherwise, they'll take over everything. That's a food source. It's a source of nutrition, densely valuable. How do you prepare it? And believe it or not, it's so easy. It's not, and they're out there. They're free. And now you're beginning to see, I'm hearing from farmers all over the country that there is now a market for these alternative leafy greens. In Louisiana, Ben Burkett is saying that they're coming into the market. We're hearing about Atlanta. We're hearing about it in Philadelphia, in New York City, in Richmond. In California, people are now developing markets. Pea shoots, which is another delicious, nutritious leaf, are now showing up in markets. So I'm not saying Ujamaa is having this influence. I'm saying we're part of a movement to regain traditional indigenous knowledge, to honor our ancestors. I believe if the Confederates can put up monuments all over the South, we can honor our ancestors by at least naming them, by acknowledging the contribution they've made to human history and civilization, and by reclaiming some of their foodways and practices, which include the idea that every family should have some crop that they're growing, should be doing something, even in an apartment. We're doing research at Princeton University on how to establish apartment and gardens. What is the best condition to grow inside your place in Harlem, or your city dwelling in Chicago, or wherever you might be? We need to all at least be growing our own herbs. They're expensive. Why not grow your own?
I recently published a video on the ATTRA YouTube site about urban gardening, and it was in collaboration with Echo Global Farms, but we demonstrate how to use a small space or even a wall with milk jugs, how to grow herbs and different salads just to have some access to food. It's more geared towards the global South, but it's definitely something that could be implemented on an apartment balcony, for example. And I think, especially as you were speaking of the movement, even within like my age group and within the people that I surround myself with, there is definitely this resurgence of interest of going back to the land, and maybe a mistrust in the government in what was recommended in regards to food and medicine, and how we're trying to kind of almost go back to basics and back to the land to rediscover what the earth naturally provides for us, because she really provides everything that we could ever need. And I just think that it gives me goosebumps as we're speaking. It's just so exciting and powerful to see this resurgence of, hunger for indigenous practices and going back to the land. To wrap it up, though, you have this quote on your website from Winona LaDuke, and it says, "Seeds are not just seeds. They're like ancestors. They have a history. Seeds have stories." And I really want to thank you today for sharing all of those stories that you had. And it was just really beautiful to learn everything that you know about the African heritage and the stories about African Americans in America and the seed saving tradition. And I'm wondering, how can people get involved? How can they participate in what you're doing, whether that's on a local level or actually with Ujamaa? How can they get involved?
Let me just say that every person can grow something. And so we're saying to people, let's not wait till next year. Let's get started. The herbs that you grow in your little kitchen window, are all medicinal in nature. Part of the work that we did with oral history, and I know Winona was talking about this research, is looking at our oral histories. What did Granny use? I mean, if you had a stomach ache or you fell down and you hurt your knee. I remember growing up in Los Angeles, there was aloe vera everywhere. They break off a piece and put that on that wound, it would heal immediately, and just the traditions of, if you had a sore throat, horehound, it was something that was in most gardens to do with that. And the honey, people had, just the basic things that people had, that resurgence of knowledge, that desire to do this can start with one simple act of getting started. If you don't want to take on your entire backyard, grow bags, and so we've started writing children's books. We published our first children's book called Big Daddy Greasy Collard Greens, and it's the story of my grandfather and how and children and how seeds are started and the heritage around farming, acknowledging that a discussion around land and the value of land and what you can do with it if you have your own land. I mean, so much Black property was lost, so much farmland is lost. Right now, I'm just totally blown away by the number of young white farmers that are committing suicide, that have lost their property, could not make a living. And so we need to look at how we can honor our farming traditions by making it possible for small scale growers to earn a living. With just an eighth of an acre, a farmer can become a seed farmer. That's all you need. You don't need a lot of land. You don't need a lot of plants, but you need some information. You need to know how many plants are necessary in order to preserve the integrity of a variety. And you need to know maybe how to preserve that. So what happened with tomatoes is, if you plant tomatoes, they're going to be coming at you. Well, that's why people made spaghetti sauce. Okay, so you take some of those, you put them, you can them. Or I had a peach tree in my backyard in Los Angeles, and then, oh Lord, all those peaches would come at the same time. What do you do with those? Well, we sliced some, we ate some, we made peach pie, we froze some. So then a whole series of other skills come once you get started. So my message is, don't wait. You can plant greens and grains right now. Every family should be growing their own grains. People were able to produce their own cornmeal. When you fry that fish every Friday night, you need that cornmeal. But there's so many varieties of corn that are easy to grow. We have also the work we're doing with indigenous communities, like the Lenape pulling corn, which was almost lost to the Lenape people. But this is an amazing corn that can be a delicious sweet corn and can be dried and also used. I'm trying to get people to grow their own grits, I'm working on that. Also to preserve things like okra, things that come really fast, to dry it. So all the things that it takes, our goal is to get people started. Interview all the elders in your family, find out what knowledge is left. Honor your elders by asking them about these questions. Care enough. And I do believe that when you honor your ancestors, they bless you. There is honor and benefits to showing respect to them. And one more phrase that's similar to what Winona said, which is something that I believe is, if you are what you eat, and most people believe that, then you are what your ancestors ate. Therefore, you should be growing and eating the foods of your ancestors.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with me. And I'm just so excited that we had the chance to finally connect. This was a really long time coming, and it was definitely worth it. How can people connect with you? Where can they find more information about the organization? Do you have any upcoming events, anything that you want to plug?
Yes, we now have been producing publications. So if you go to Ujamaa Farms, you can, ujamaafarms.com, you can see our publications. You can also join our mailing list. We now publish a monthly newsletter that has all these tidbits of information. And we also have a quarterly journal. You can also go to Ujamaa Seeds. I think the number one way that most people in the public have decided to support us is by considering buying seeds from us. When you buy seeds from Ujamaa seeds.com, you support the work which is mostly educational. We see Momert as the fiduciary. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We need help in terms of people who have skills, who are interested in learning seed saving. We offer classes, workshops, and then we offer a 9-month class on seed farming. We hope to able to offer a full range of courses, from things like pickling or it's what do you do with all those doggone cucumbers? They're coming fast, and they don't last that long. Let's say harvest them. What do you do with all that stuff? And then soil health and all the things around that. I really hope that people will visit our website. You can join our mailing list, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and soon, hopefully, TikTok. I love TikTok. So, we are looking for people who are interested in our vision, who want to join the bandwagon. Let's get started preserving heritage crops. Let's get started observing and learning about these crops and honoring our ancestors by doing so.
That's awesome. I'll definitely link everything in the notes of the podcast so everybody can find your information. And I seem to remember that I do owe you some Everglades tomato seeds, which I'll make sure to get those to you next time I see you.
I did not make a note. I knew somebody owed me those tomatoes, and now I know it's you. Those are very prolific, aren't they?
They go crazy. They can take over your whole garden and they just keep producing as long as the weather is good. So next time I see you, I'll make sure that I get those to you. But thanks again so much. It was so beautiful being able to connect with you. And I just really thank you for your time.
It was my pleasure. It's lovely to meet a fellow seed lover.
I hope you have a wonderful day. And I hope everybody enjoyed this podcast. Thank you guys.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.ncat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Rich Myers. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.